Hi, everybody. Welcome to our third AMA, Ask Me Anything with the Matterless staff. I am Damir, and with me today is JD.
Hello.
We are currently situated. I'm in transit, so apologies for the background noise. This is the maybe the quietest place I could find around. And I am in Croatia. And JD, where are you at?
So I am in Hong Kong. So I've been here about 3 years, originally from America. But I'm JD. I'm one of the senior Unity devs here at Matterless. So I work a lot on the animal behavior and AR stuff that you see in the Incos app.
We're very excited that you're with us today. Last month we had a really nice chat with Jason, which took some unexpected turns, which is something that I hope we will do today as well, especially because we don't have a chance to talk so much to each other because we're in a remote company, we're in different time zones, and there's like so many things everybody's doing every day that I'm actually very excited just to hang out with you today.
Yeah, it should be fun. So did one of these not so official, but a chat with some of the backers. Yeah, a month or two ago, and that was really fun to just talk about the app and interact with the community and things like that.
Let's see. The first question is from Avalon.eth. Tentative date for the official launch. Any updates on the Android version? All right, so the launch date for the Incos app, previously only known as the Matterless app. Incos is what we call our creatures. Incos is short for incorporeals, so it means bodiless, right? Matterless in a way. The launch date for Incos is sometime in Q4, and we already have everybody who is already here knows that we have a Patreon where you get the access to our post beta. The other thing that she asked, any updates on the Android version? Okay, so people have been asking this question for quite some time. So I'm going to give you my take, which is a little bit more in detail because it's been a long time. It's been a long time since people have been asking this. So we really looked into it so that we can give you a more clear answer. So any updates on the Android version? Why are we creating the Incos app on the iOS? Well, to us, it makes sense because to create a stable iOS version is a bit more simple with the amount of resources that we have right now. There are a lot more devices on the Android which require a lot more, they're a bigger logistical challenge. So there's a lot more potential for bugs. So some of the pros for Android mobile app development is you have an open system. It's very flexible. It has a very low barrier to entry because of different crowdsourcing frameworks. You can basically have tons of different plugins. You can play around with features. It makes it much more flexible than the iOS. However, this significantly complicates the development process. Then we also have release. In contrast to iOS, pushing apps is much easier on Google Play. You can literally get it live in a couple of hours. But the problem is, because of the fragmentation that happens, there are multitudes of devices with different resolutions and screen sizes. So this makes apps design and UI development much more challenging. And probably our creative director has something to say about how to deliver a responsive app that runs seamlessly across many different devices. Another thing with Android is the testing, because you have multiple Android versions and devices. QA specialists, we currently hired a fantastic QA person, Thomas. So Thomas would have to spend much more time to thoroughly test the app on all different models. This is currently untenable for what we're doing, and of course, the fragmentation and the testing it kind of raises the costs to develop for this platform, as opposed to the iOS, where we have a couple of really good benchmarks that we can hit. So if we're talking about performance, iOS is more stable. It's an easier to use platform. It's a closed platform. This is the whole Apple policy about everything that it creates, all of its software and hardware allows implementation through very, very strict guidelines. And because of this, the platform is fast, the apps are easy to build, and there's less piracy. So this is something that's very important for us. Integration with other devices is another thing. So Apple now currently has around 20. Maybe I'm wrong, JD. Do you know, is it more than 20 different types of iOS mobile devices?
I think that's about right. I'm mostly an Android user myself, so I'm not super up to date with the amount of devices, but it usually hovers around that many. 20, 30.
Thank you. So yeah, this is in contrast to Android, which has thousands of devices.
Yeah.
With numerous different types of systems, and also, on the iOS they have very strict guidelines for the design. So there's a very strict design guide for the UI, so that it can help different developers create a more exceptional and clear user experience. So it's kind of robust in terms of both software and hardware. So afterwards, it's easier to maintain. So because of this, almost every device that has the Apple Store runs seamlessly, flawlessly. So this is the choice that we made.
Yeah, actually, from a technical standpoint, you brought a little bit of this up, but like you said, iOS is a much smaller range of devices. It's a more structured, almost restrictive environment of what you develop. So they have stricter regulations for what you can put in the store, what capabilities your apps can have, and things like that. And so developing for iOS first allows us to not only develop quicker, because we're not worried about, as we're going, supporting all these devices, but also it's a lot easier to go from iOS to Android than it is to go from Android to iOS, because you're developing within the more restrictive environment. And then so we know already that if we can get through on the App Store, then we'll obviously be able to get into the Play Store, because the Play Store is less restrictive. So we're moving from a stricter environment to a less strict environment. And obviously there's the challenges with things like form factor, like you said, screen sizes. We'll have to make some potential UI, UX changes to support that. But that's much easier to do that than to develop your software with these like intrinsic capabilities that are okay on Android, but then when you go to iOS, they're not okay with it, and so it's a lot easier to go from iOS to Android and Android to iOS than from Android to iOS. So it's a pretty common way to build apps.
Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is by Tracy. Are flying animals in the works, and are they much more technically challenging? So because a lot of development in AR has to do with plane detection, like my first intuition was that it's going to be more simple to develop flying animals. But then after I spoke to JD, I realized that it has its own set of challenges. So maybe JD, you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so initially on the surface, it seems like it would be simpler, because it's easy to, you can, right now we have to deal with the current ground-based Incos, right? We have to deal with making sure they're on a plane, making sure that they don't, walk through the floor and things like that. But actually it's simpler in a way, because you're only dealing with two dimensions in your interaction. You're horizontal and kind of vertical in a way. So you're X and Z, right? So you're only worried about things that are on the same level as you. And so with a flying Inco, yeah, the positioning is easier. We just drop it somewhere in space in front of you, right? But then if it wants to interact with something on the ground, we then have to calculate a way for it to go down there. There's entirely new. You're adding a third dimension to your movement. It's like walking versus swimming underwater, right? As a diver, a scuba diver, right? So you have to worry about things that are all around you rather than things that are just on your level. So there's this new type of moveset you have to deal with. There's new animations. It's how do you make sure the animal flies around without running into walls and things like that. It's all things that are technically doable. There's just from a certain perspective, it is simpler, because you're not dealing with being so close to the floor. But when you're actually flying around, there's more that you have to kind of take into account that you might not think of initially. Although I would love to get some
But I mean,
animals in the app. Yeah.
so here's my question. Since we're still using SLAM, right? Wouldn't plane detection be happening in the background anyway? So for instance, if you have walls around, you could actually still be able to move around and scan the environment while your Inco is flying around in the air.
Yeah, you would be able to. So, that takes care of the at least initial environment scanning, but then the flying Inco movement needs to take all that into account. So there's all this other behavior logic that needs to go into it as well, right? So it's it's something that eventually we'll need to do for the ground-based Incos anyway, because we want to stop them from walking through objects and walking through walls and stuff like that. But they have a slightly more restrictive movement, right? They can only walk around in this small flat area unless we move them to somewhere else. And that actually is something that we're working on right now. That movement with the new teleport and how the Inco can move and can move from one vertical surface to another. Is something that
actually we've done some very exciting VFX just to try to visualize what it would look like, and after I saw it, I lost my mind. I was thinking like, wow, this is exactly what is the difference between a meaty pet, a meat space pet, and a Matterless Inco, because an AR pet can do so many things that a material pet cannot. So this gives us a lot more playroom to try to figure out some mechanics on, how would an AR animal behave if it actually existed in the space around you? How would it move? How would it react to certain things? Would it jump off a table, or would it just teleport from one plane to another, right?
I mean, if I was able to teleport myself, I think I would teleport everywhere. So that's, so I don't have to jump, but maybe the Inco might feel differently. We'll see.
How would you teleport? Would you like to have to squeeze your muscles and be like, I want to go to the next place, or would you just do it instantly with no effort?
Well, I think the better you get at it, the less effort you have to put in. But at first, I think you're going to work with the ridiculous trying to get it to work, and then the more
right. So it's
more you practice,
teleportation.
You can effortlessly just
Yeah. So teleportation is a skill-based effort.
I think it would. All right.
We should incorporate it into our design philosophy.
Yeah.
Let's see the next question. So another one from Tracy. Will Matterless migrate to Unreal later? What do you think, JD? How are we on this?
Yeah. So currently we don't have any plans to migrate to Unreal. We're really happy with Unity and the speed and capabilities that we get from it. That being said, from a kind of more technical code standpoint, one of our philosophies here is that we try to write all of our code to be engine agnostic, right? So we, Unity provides a lot of Unity specific tools that you can use, but we actually prefer to not use those and to write things that are more traditional software patterns. So that theoretically, if we needed to move to another game engine, obviously it would still take some time because you have to use some of the stuff that Unity built in. But we like to write our code in a way that it's tied to the game engine as little as possible. Which not only makes it easier to move to another engine if we decided we needed to do that, but it also makes it easier for new developers to understand, especially if they're not experienced in Unity. So then you're not only if we want to hire some really good talent, maybe they don't have any Unity experience, but they wouldn't necessarily need to understand our code base. Obviously, there's a couple little things they would need to look at, but I would say we're more like developing an app that runs in Unity rather than we're building a Unity app. Just from a
yeah. So some of our policies in hiring technically adept staff was to find people who are able to work with the principles of what a 3D engine is, as opposed to just being able to work in Unity, right? So it's like trying to find a graphic designer who only does Photoshop or Adobe InDesign or something. So like you wouldn't want to have a person who only knows how to use one tool, because if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's more about figuring out the principle, and once the principles are there, we can build a architecture which can support switching to a different engine at some point, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you, Tracy, for that question. Now, Wenmoon is asking a question in the chat itself. So, what are you doing in development, says Wenmoon. When can we expect a working beta version of the application with new features? Well, you can expect a beta version with new features every 6 weeks. We're currently on 0.4 and 0.5 is coming out in a couple of days. We're very, very excited because it's also going to switch to the Auki, the newest version of the Auki SDK 0.4, which is our underlying protocol, which allows us to create these seamless, instantly calibrated experiences. Perhaps, JD, you can go into more detail here.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, like Damir said, we're trying to push a new version out roughly every 6 weeks, whenever we feel comfortable with the features that we can show. So, yeah, 0.5 should be out sometime early next week. And then we'll probably have another release shortly after 0.5.1, and that will have the new Auki SDK. So that's still currently in the process of being implemented. So it's a pretty big update, but brings some really, really cool features from Auki. So
I guess you guys are still going through the documentation from 0.4 because it came out like 3-4 days ago.
Yeah, a couple days ago. So that's actually what I've been working on all this week. So it's mostly done. So it's exciting. But
okay,
yeah, so,
awesome.
Yeah, that's roughly the timeline.
So what do you think for you is the most exciting thing about using the new Auki SDK?
Oh, there's so the new Auki SDK. I think some exciting parts. There is a lot of optimization that's been done, which is nice. So things will run quicker, things will connect faster. We'll get into the experience with the pet quicker. From an actual feature standpoint, we have there's some new animation stuff that's in there that will allow us to just make the animations a bit more seamless. Especially if you're on a slow internet connection, right? There could be, so if you have a really, really long latency, like a high latency, you might see some issues with in the previous version of animations being slightly off time. And this is not unique to us. This is something that every single multiplayer application has to deal with, But the new update should help out a lot with that. And then, most of the other updates have been code structure and things that maybe the average user won't see. But for us as engineers, makes it a lot easier to work with.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next question. So Wenmoon says, actually, I mean the functions that were mentioned in the white paper: Tamagotchi-like mechanics, basic pet training, simple hand interaction, NFT support, MetaMask token, safe-to-play, location-based interaction support, etc. So somebody who's been reading our white paper very closely, Wenmoon, that's really great. So yeah, the Tamagotchi-like mechanics is something that we had in mind since the very beginning, and our product owner Jason, who has been on the previous AMA, he's in charge of kind of like the features that we are implementing and the speed at which we are implementing those features. Because the thing that we envision, the Inco app, is big. It's a big thing. It's a complex thing to make. A lot of behavioral and engineering challenges. So currently what we're focusing on is to deliver in Q4 a Tamagotchi-like experience, which we internally call the fish tank. JD, what does the Tamagotchi fish tank mean to you?
Yeah, so fish tank was brought on. I think that was last year that we actually mentioned the fish tank, and it was essentially a way to kind of get a universal understanding throughout the different developers of kind of what we were trying to build, and also kind of give us ideas for different features we could put in. So it's things like you can see your Inco walking around, and it has a small environment that it can interact with. So whether that's active things that you do, such as placing something in the environment, or passive things that it might see, so parts of the environment. And it was more of an initial. It was less interactive than I think we're starting to push for now. But it was just the very first like V1 version of the Matterless pet, the Inco, right? So it was a thing you could look at, you could feed it, you could take care of it. A thing you could kind of take care of, right?
Yeah, and as we're rethinking some of the ideas that we had, and also some of the features that we were able to develop, we're changing that original idea. We're a startup, so we're not a company with an established business model. We're a startup. We're trying to figure out what it is that we really want to do and how we're going to do it in the fastest, cheapest, and most highest utility kind of way. And we realized that the first thing that we really want to focus on is the simple hand interaction, because we have this 3D hand reconstruction, which is a patent pending technology, which is going to allow any RGB monocular camera on a baseline device. What that means is you can use your phone and not the stereoscopic vision type of VR headset or something, or an enterprise headset like HoloLens. With any consumer-facing phone, you're able to see that hand as an object in space and finally start touching things, because the hand is basically, there's a glove that goes on top of it. It's an invisible glove, and then as you move your hands around, like, it becomes a 3D object which can interact with other virtual objects in the space. So this is something we see as the first step, and we are very, very close to it. And this is what I think I can uncover that the tiny update in the 0.5 is exactly that, right?
Yeah, so I think so is we still need to run some performance tests and everything, but because we had the initial version and it was working. You could touch the Inco and it could respond, which was probably the coolest thing I've worked on at Matterless so far. And it's something that you've, because I've noticed, one thing that I do every time I like to show a lot of my friends, they ask what I'm working on, so I just pull out one of the phones and show them. And the very first thing everyone tries to do is touch it.
Yeah, it's such an intuitive thing. And, one of the reasons why we chose animals in the first place is because people have this intuitive need to touch them, right? Even if they're digital. If I show it to them, some of the people go for the screen. So some of them try to tap the screen to scratch them, and some of them go with their hand. And we had this amazing moment. We had Auki BT, Johannes. So he filmed his son, his 4-year-old, who was playing with an Inco. What Johannes is doing is he's filming his son, who is using another phone, trying to touch the pet. So he's 4 years old. He never used the app before. He just intuits that this is how you're supposed to interact with this digital creature. For him, the creature is real. And then for Johannes, this is a beautiful moment, because Johannes is filming it on another device, which is instantly calibrated into the same AR space. So Johannes can see his son using a different device, trying to see and touch the same thing. This is basically our entire thesis. Is we need intersubjectivity. We need things which we perceive as real, because other people also validate them as real. So our reality is actually a combination of what we see and what we think others also see around us. And if those things are aligned, then we have a sense of reality. And even though it's digital, it's real. And this is kind of what Matterless is all about, making digital things real, putting into human consciousness that digital things can be real.
Yeah, and I think as getting that actually out into people's hands too. So but like Damir was saying, possibly in the .1, the 5.5.1 update, we'll see. So it's all about. So it's actually in some of our development builds already, and it's working. So I actually was able to touch it, and the animal was sad. It was its happiness was very low, and it tried to bite me when I did it. So it growled and snarled at me, and then if it's happy, it will be excited. So it responds based on its mood, and we were ironing out some performance issues, and if I think those hopefully should be solved in the new Aoki SDK. So if those are up to the standards of performance wise, we obviously want to get that out as soon as we can. So it's very, very close.
We are so looking forward to it. Like the rest of the team is so looking forward to try it. And one of our new hires, our CTO Robin, he's an incredible engineer, and already some of the things that he put in, which are I will say they're pretty standard in the industry. So we have gaze detection, which means that once there's a cone of vision that the Inco has, when you enter it at a certain point, it's going to turn towards you. Also, we have spine bending for the 3D modeling, so the bones are like the whole rig is moving a bit more, I would say, naturally towards, like, instead of just like snapping at 19 degrees and going to a different direction. All of these things, when you see them all together, they really increase the sense that this is a real thing, that this is a living creature. And everybody I showed it to, at some people were even like, okay, so you like, this is a puppy, and they're like, oh, this is like a digital thing. Like, wow.
Yeah,
that's pretty powerful. That's a moment where people kind of like, they look at the phone, they look at me, and they're like, what is this?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up too, because the like you said, it's not some of the like the hand or the head following, head tracking, and the spine bending is not, none of this is particularly groundbreaking. It's apps have been doing this forever, and it's pretty standard in game development. But something that's standard in another game, the exciting thing about working on Incos is when we put it into Incos, it's like you see it and you're just like blown away by the first time I saw the Shiba sit down and then just turn and look right at me, it's like, yeah, this is nothing that is particularly challenging or intense code-wise, but it's like, because of the environment that we've created for these features, right? It becomes something more than that. So it's a testament to
like
the foundation that we've built, I think.
And when I hear somebody who's a technically competent person who's in the industry say that, it makes me even happier. It makes me very excited, because that means that the original idea of how we want to design it is actually becoming congruent with how it looks like. So even a person who understands the back end of how all these elements are coming together, like, if it's even exciting for you, then it means that we're like definitely doing the right thing for now.
Yeah.
So our internal compass is like totally, showing north. Another thing, basic pet training. So yeah, like once we have that 3D hand recognition and the hand is an object, we can start playing around with how to create a gestural interface or use the hand tracking for that object to code or encode certain commands to certain either movements or shapes that the hand can make. And this is something that, like, we're not going to go into much detail because it's still a little bit secret, but it's something that we've been thinking about since the very beginning. So there are multiple types in which we can create commands for the Inco, just as you would with the pet that you own in the material world, and they respond to different senses, right? So they will respond to touch, they will respond to what they see, they will respond to what they hear.
Yeah, and that kind of is and it's something that I especially when talking to people outside the company, something that we need to stress even more is the difference between hand detection and hand reconstruction. Hand detection is almost every AR app does that, which is it detects there is a hand. It doesn't know where it is, it just knows it's on the screen. We know there's a hand on. Hand reconstruction is, not only do we know that there is a hand in front of the camera, we know where it is and we know what it's doing, which allows for just a exponential amount of interactions we can do with that compared to just detecting that yes, there's a hand or no, there isn't a hand, but we know where the hand is and what shape the hand is in. So.
Yeah, JD, tell us more. I would like to hear
Oh yeah,
your spin on our main design philosophy.
Yeah. So intersubjectivity is something that gets brought up a lot, and for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a concept of it essentially means having a shared cognitive understanding or a mutual awareness with another being, whether it's a human or an animal or something else. It's kind of it's a very it's kind of has a vague definition, but it's something like everyone is maybe understanding the same thought, understanding the same concept, and it's a big thing with the Incos app, because we want the key thing we want is we want the Inco to feel real. We want it to feel like not just as a toy, but as a creature, as something that you can interact with and bond with, and that understands. So even something like the head tracking, where the Inco looks at you, that's a huge boost to intersubjectivity, because it's the Inco now is aware that you are there. Having a cognitive awareness with something in AR means that us as a physical being need to be aware of the AR environment, which we are because we're running the app and looking through the camera. But the Inco in AR needs to be aware of the physical environment, so it needs to understand. We need to the Inco is aware of the AR environment because we're programming it, and it obviously is aware of everything that's there. But it also needs to be aware of the physical environment and recognize where people are, where objects in the world are. So if you're looking at this virtual, a virtual creature that understands the same physical world that we do, the believability and the realism of that whole experience just shoots up, and
yeah, it has, like, we achieve sensory congruence, right? So sensory congruence is another one of these terms that we talk about a lot, and that and sensory congruence means that all of our senses become aligned. So for instance, like if the Inco walks off the table and starts hovering in the air, the spell is broken, right? So you understand that this is not a real thing. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're trying to figure out how to actually make sure that this doesn't happen. And the technical challenge of it is, of course, to have better plane detection. But the narrative, or kind of like the in-game design or creative design challenges, maybe we can actually just not, like, every time when it comes close to a surface that ends, if we can't achieve that level of technical ability, we can actually try to teleport it from one spot to another, and that becomes a seamless experience because there's sensory congruence between what you see and what the pet is seeing. So like there are many ways to solve this, and we're thinking about how to do that. But basically, once we have this pillar of intersubjectivity that we are trying to share, like it's a shared reality, and then on the other hand, if we have the sensory congruence, meaning that we want things to be like all of our senses to be aligned on, or where things are, where sounds are coming from, if we touch something, if our hand goes through it or not. Like these are the things which are going to help the entire experience become more palatable and somehow psychologically safer in a way, because we are going to feel like this world has rules that you cannot break. And the moment that you feel that the rules are set, you start believing in what's going on, and you're starting to think about how to actually move through the world in a way which is consistent with the rules, which is like a very high level of immersion.
Yeah, and if you look at it you can look at it almost like from a more game development perspective as well, or a video game perspective, where in any other game where you are, let's say you're playing a game like a role-playing game like an RPG, or you're playing a shooter or whatever, you are a character in the game. You are not yourself in real life. You are playing a character. You are controlling an object in the game. You're controlling a person, or controlling a car, or controlling a whatever. So if a NPC is talking to you in a video game, they're not talking to you, they're talking to your character. But something like Incos, you're not a character in the game, you are yourself in real life. And So when the Shiba looks at you, it's not looking at your character in the video game, it's looking at you as a person. It's interacting with you as a person, which is something that no other game really does. And AR is the technology that allows that to become possible, right? And it is a challenge because, humans can, when you're playing a character in a game, you're constricted to a set of interactions, that you can account for, but
yeah, exactly. And the way that we envision AR to be is to be something that enhances your experience of your everyday world, everyday life. Unlike VR, where you will basically do the thing that you just talked about, right? So you will enter a world with the willing suspension of disbelief about what's going to happen in that environment. Whereas in AR, literally anything can happen at any moment. And that's what makes it so magical, because we can surprise you, because you don't know what the rules are, right? You think you know what the rules are. And then we come up with a new way for the Inco to move or to interact with you, or a new gesture that it recognizes, or an interaction it has with another Matterless object, which you never even thought was possible. Like the same way that if you have a dog and you take it out, you don't know what that dog's going to do. I mean, you kind of know what it's going to do.
Yeah.
It's going to try to fetch your stick and hang out with other dogs and be super curious and kind of dumb and slobber around, but you don't really know what's going to happen. And that's the same feeling that we want to achieve with what the Matterless Inco is going to do. Which kind of bleeds into the question that Tracy set up, and it's what is our long-term vision for really what we're going to do, in terms of AI, in terms of stuff that we kind of daydream about. So actually, I think that everybody in the company has a slightly different vision of what that is, because once we get into the point where we add AI and add multiple features in which you can interact with the space around you, it becomes kind of infinite. So for instance, I know you, JD, you've been working on AR dice that are being tossed.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, what do you see this what do you see your creative work turning into long term? And you can go as you can go nuts. You can go 10 years into the future if you want.
Yeah. So the thing Demir brought up with the dice was we do every other Friday we have a creative exploration day here that developers or anyone in the company can work on whatever we want to related to the app. So we get to really play around with doing stuff. So one thing that so to get a little bit into the technical weeds, there's a few different ways you can handle objects in a game. One is what's called kinematic, or not kinematic. I forget the name for on the rigid body, but it's essentially an object that's not affected by physics. No matter what happens, it's always going to sit in the same spot. And it won't respond. It can walk through objects. It can be hit by stuff. And the object will go right through. It's essentially static. It'll sit there, and it can move around, but it won't stop for anything. It won't bounce. So it won't interact like a normal object. And actually, a lot of objects in games are like this. But if something is Unity has a physics simulation system where it can simulate gravity, it simulates friction, bouncing, adding forces. Things like ragdolls for objects and things like that. So it allows something to bounce around. And so what I wanted to experiment with is using that built-in physics system across a shared AR experience, which there's a lot of challenges that go into that.
Right. How do you synchronize it, right? So how do you synchronize it across devices?
Yeah, so the physics system is not deterministic. So and that means that if I run the same physics calculation on two phones for the same object, the results might be different. So the actual thing that I built was a user playing with the Matterless app. There was a little test button that I put in the corner, and if you press this button, it would shoot a dice, like from a game, a six-sided dice. It would shoot out from the phone. It would be affected by gravity. It would bounce around the room. So it would bounce off of tables. It would bounce off of the floor. Then if somebody else joined the Alki space, they could both throw these dice, and these dice would bounce around. And that was. I remember I posted a video of what I had done, and even some of the engineers at Alki messaged me, and they're like, "How did you do that?" Because they weren't even sure how
Yeah.
it was done. So it was.
Yeah,
It,
and then it's like, is it over a network? Like, is
yeah,
it? And then it's like, no, it's like for
right.
now, it's just experimenting. But like, yeah, like once you achieve it over a network, like that's another layer of sensory congruence, right?
Yes,
So
it
again,
was. It was.
we
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, yeah, it was synchronized over the network. It was deterministic, so everyone in the space would see the same thing happening using real physics, which was the part that they were intrigued by, right?
Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, because that's something, something that happens very often in when we talk to people about what we do. Most people who don't know a lot about AR, they don't really understand how big the thing that we're doing is. So creating an instantly calibrated peer-to-peer positioning system with very, very precise positioning, like what that entails is it's like it's a very complex thing. And for people who don't know AR, they just say, "Oh, like I thought you could already do that, right?" But then the people who are really in AR, who are in the space, like when they see what we do, they do a double take and they're like, how did you manage that? Like that's something people have been working on for a long time. So it's very exciting, and I think for most of us who are working here, we are genuinely very happy. And I myself, I am incredibly interested in how this is going to work. And we're working in a fully remote company, so we have a lot of challenges and opportunities. So Shuning asked, how is it to work in a fully remote company? What are some of these challenges and opportunities? So for me, the challenge is definitely being in different time zones. So we can't talk to each other as much as we would like, as if we were in the office together, and it's kind of like it becomes like a very big challenge to manage everybody's schedule, to stay on target and meet deadlines. And one of the ways in which we're trying to mitigate that is by doing stuff like this, where we just hang out, even though there's a 6-hour difference currently. So right now it's 1 p.m. in Croatia, it's 7 p.m. in Hong Kong, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then we have some people here who are in the same time zone as I am, some in the same time zone as JD is, and then on top of that, we also have people who are working in Vancouver. Part of our art team is there, very talented people. But it's, of course, now we have 3 time zones, so it becomes quite challenging to manage that and to make sure that the task, in the time zone which is after the time zone where people already stopped working, like how do we get like a deliverable? So it's kind of tough. But we also have, we have a daily meeting where we try to have all 3 time zones in the same place, and hopefully it's not too painful for everyone. Some people need to stay up late, some people need to get up very early, but that's just the nature of the work. And then on the other hand, because we do that, we also have access to something that local companies, brick and mortar companies, don't have, and that is talent. Like we get to hire whoever we want anywhere in the world. We get to talk to anybody who is interested in helping us build our dream. And because these people might never be able to work with us if we had a local office, like let's say in Hong Kong, even though we do have an office in Hong Kong, like if it basically becomes limitless for anybody who really is interested in creating something revolutionary in AR to just become a part of the team, maybe even tomorrow. And they can just join and they plug in. We gave them the list of resources and they hang out with us like this. Because actually, this is our office. Like this room is like our
Yeah.
office.
Yeah, and that's one of the hard things is not being able to connect on that personal level with people, and also the time zones. My work schedule tends to be shifted a lot later, so I work later into the night and start work later, which I don't mind. I almost prefer that. But yeah, about what you said about having, I don't think we have more than 2 or 3 people in the company who are from the same country. We have, I think yeah, pretty much.
We do have a lot. We have an influx of Swedes
Sweet.
recently. There's more Swedish people. But yeah, what you said about loving what we do and kind of like having very similar interests. like I really enjoy hanging out with the people here. And for instance, JD and I never met face to face, but we've been hanging out for a year now.
Yeah.
uh, that's kind of nuts. Like when you really think about it, who knows, because of Corona, because of everything, who knows when it's going to be the next time that we can really travel freely. And I would love for you to come and visit Croatia, to have a chance to see where I'm from. I would come to Hong Kong and make sure that I see where you're hanging out in Hong Kong, what you do in Hong Kong. Jason as well, Cherlin, a lot of the people who are over there. I would love to go and visit Kerwin in Singapore. I would love to go visit Shuning in Suzhou, Patrick in Beijing, and Andreas in Greece. And also Tracy, who is now, I don't know where Tracy is. I think she's in Spain. Tracy's not. Tracy's like a almost like a person who is working here, because she's so supportive. Where are you, Tracy, right now?
I am house sitting in Sweden right now. Because you guys were comparing hot temperatures earlier, so that's why I left Spain for the summer.
Smart. So you're in Sweden now, so maybe at some point you can meet up with the team. I think it's only a matter of time before you get to meet some of us in Meet Space.
Well.
So who from the team is in Sweden?
So Robin, our CTO, he is from Sweden, and he's flying back to Sweden, I think today, from Portugal, because we had an on-site. The Aoki team had an on-site in Portugal, and most of the team is now traveling to their next destination. So the CEO, Nils, he's going to London. After that, he's going to come here to Croatia. Johannes, who's doing BD for Aoki, he's flying to Canada. Like we're all over the place. We don't stand still, that's for sure. But part of the charm is to actually get people together. So there's nothing that can really replace the physical sense of being together. And this is why everything that we are building in Matterless is about being together in the same room, both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
So the technology is supposed to enable you to be more communal.
Yeah, and I would love to meet some of you guys someday. It'd be fun.
Same. Yeah, JD?
Oh yeah, one thing I was going to say is I think one of my other favorite parts about working for a fully remote company is it doesn't matter where you are when you're working, so that if you do need to go do things like, especially as someone who's an expat, right? Like if I need to go visit family, I don't have to worry about, do I have enough time off? Is that going to work? Because I can work from wherever I am. So I can, if something comes up and I need to go home, it's not a stressful thing for me, because I know that as long as I'm in the meetings and getting my stuff done, it doesn't matter where I'm at, and it's obviously that comes with its own set of self-discipline and things, but having worked for remote companies for years before, it's something that you get used to. And I went to Thailand for a month and just hung out in Airbnbs and coffee shops working, and then was in Singapore and saw Kerwin when I was there for I was there for about almost 2 weeks, and we're working the whole time, but it's nice to have that flexibility as well, and especially living far away from my family. It's
it
nice.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much where you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter so much where you are. It's who you're with. Who do you feel connected with?
Yeah.
And that's also part of what we do and what we're trying to evoke. Thank you, everybody, for being in our third official AMA. This one is for Patreons. The next one that we're going to do is going to be for the general public. So you will be able to chat with us. I hope that more people who are in the server are able to join, because we love your questions. And we ended up now talking about four or five of your questions. We actually had a bunch of other questions prepared in case we don't have so much to talk about. But it seems like every time we talk, we do have a bunch of stuff that we can either reiterate or expand upon, which is, for me personally, I love it. It's one of the best parts of this job, like talking about ideas with other talented people. Before we go, I would love to, everybody who is watching this who is not on our Patreon, to become a Patreon and head over to www.patreon.com/Matterless. So you can join our Discord server at discord.gg/Matterless and figure out what it is that we do behind the scenes. We have access to the Inco closed beta, we have Discord benefits, and we're helping support the charity each month with your kind donations. So actually half of everything that we get from our Patreons goes to a charity every single month. So in a couple of days, we're coming out with this 0.5 closed beta, which is going to have a bunch of improvements that we already talked about: improved lighting, pathing, also when I say pathing, I mean pathfinding, and also gaze detection, improvements in sound, improvements in general in the quality of the experience. So we would love to have you and show you what it is that we do.